and I want to welcome you to another episode of Beyond the Surface Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer. This morning I'd like to discuss a rarely spoken about topic, debtor's prison. That's right, debtor's prison. Debtor's prison is a prison for people basically who are unable to pay their debts. Now, this is by no means a new concept. It's been around for years. It's actually something that was used during medieval times, primarily during the mid-19th century. But for most Westerners, it's been, outlawed for about 200 years. And essentially, it was outlawed because we got to a place in our country where we said, you know what, we're not going to throw people in prison because they can't pay their debts, which was a common, concept. You can't pay your debts, you shoot them off the prison. Well, again, we've gotten away from that practice. Well, lo and behold, it has actually been going on. It has shown back up in the United States. Primarily, I would say a dominant way we've seen it is for individuals who don't take care of their fees, paying the court. Basically, if you end up in a situation where you end up in contempt of court, for example, you can be jailed for non-payment of child support, for not paying garnishments, for back taxes. These are some of the common ways that probably most people know, but you actually can be jailed because of any sort of collection against you that goes before the courts, and they send notice to you to come out to talk about what's your ability to pay, and you ignore it. So part of what happens is people get a letter or somehow, most of it's mail. They're requested to come before the courts, and they just don't show up. And so that's seen as also standing in contempt of court. I'm having this discussion because some of the people that went to jail for their debts, some of them owed as little as $100 and something. Like, you don't have to owe thousands and thousands of dollars to end up in jail for your debts. Well, this was going on in Illinois, where individuals were serving time, getting arrested for basically not, as far as they were concerned, not having the resources, not having the money, not having the access to be able to pay their debts. And so they were arrested. They were placed in jail. Some of them were scooped up at the courts. It doesn't matter. They went to jail. So it got so serious that Lisa Madigan worked out a deal with representatives of collection companies and, small dollar lenders. These are like your payday loan companies, because they, believe it or not, your payday loan companies can put you in jail for not, prior to this law, law, they were able to put you in jail for not paying your debt. So Illinois now has what's called a Debtors Rights Act of 2012. As I'm doing this podcast, it's 2014, so you see just a couple of years ago, folks were suffering a penalty for not paying their debt, or, whether it was willfully or not willfully. And what the Debtors Rights Act of 2012 said, it mandates that courts must inquire into the debtor's ability to make payments before entering any kind of payment order. So before they put the payment order, they need to look at your assets. They need to have you at least make it before the courts. They need to make sure that you're not disabled before they do that, because what they were doing prior to that was just simply issuing a warrant for your arrest. Okay, so and part of what happened with that Debtors Rights Act is that it protects your assets now, protects your Social Security check, it protects your disability check, because all of these venues can be used to pay debt, okay? And also, the bond money. People were getting arrested or people were confiscated in court, and family members was putting up bond money to get them out. And that money, even though it was not specifically their money, was taken to pay off the debt. So yes, you were released, but the funds were never returned because it was used as part of paying off debt. All right. The other thing you need to know about the debtors' right is that that the law now limits when people can be locked up for failing to appear in court when sued over a bad debt. So, for example, Southern Illinois arrests, they used to just take the bond and turn it over to the creditors, even if someone else had paid it. And, in St. Louis, they had like 23 warrants issued for debtors on payday loans. They're no longer doing that. You have to at least, the courts have at least said, okay, we're going to limit that. We want to see why this person didn't appear in court, and then we want to actually assess whether or not, because here's the reality. Snail mail, people didn't receive their mail. There were several cases where mail was sent to the wrong address, where individuals had moved, and so they never did receive it. It's not as if this mail is sent where you sign off on it. So they said, that was a major problem with mailing a notice to show before the courts and then being punished for it. So if you fail to appear in court for a hearing in which the creditors ask about assets that can be seized to pay their debt. So that's part of what they want you to do. If you say you can't pay, they want you to show up and they want to say, hey, what do you have? Do you have a car? Do you have a house? Do you have a boat? What do you have? Do you have a 401k? Are you married? Does that person have? They really want you to show before the court to see if what you're professing to be a financial hardship is really, really true. All right, now with the new law, you have to be personally served. That's an absolute plus, that you would have to be personally served. There's no repeat serving unless the debtor can prove there's a change of circumstances. So they was sending a notice and then sending a note. They kept repeating to serve you. And now, if nothing's changed, then you got the one time that you're served, and you need to deal with the issues associated with that. There can be a second hearing. Before they would set a second hearing before they had even talked to you. Now they don't set a second hearing before issuing an arrest warrant. And then now bond is no longer automatically turned over. It's just a loss of money for the individual that showed up to court, whether you still, couldn't pay or not. Once that bond was put up, that you're never getting it back. And now the law protects that. All right, now, even though we have the debtors law that came out in 2012, many of the people are realizing that the law does miss some stuff. And one of the things that it misses is it doesn't really have an efficient notification system. So, yes, before they was trying to work with certified mail, now it's personal. It's delivered personally to the person's home. There's a gap in it, which is, what if you're just not home? And so you still miss that notice. You run the risk of falling into sort of a gap area where it seems like you're still being a little bit defiant and trying to avoid coming before the courts. The other thing is the law doesn't apply retroactively. So any debts that you incur prior to the law, it's not applicable to that. So it's not levering the individual struggle with the issue without legal recourse. So you can't go back and fix prior debt issues. So if you've been called into court for that and you owe money for that, the reality is you need to start seeing about that. Now, part of the reason I got excited about this topic is I've known many people who are on probation, and probation comes with fees. It hasn't historically, but it most certainly does now. And you get people that just don't want to pay the court fees. They decide, look, I'm not paying for that. And part of what I'm trying to warn them is you are going to pay for it. Here's something we need to know. In at least 41 states, inmates can be charged for room and board for jail and prison stays. And in at least 44 states, offenders can be billed for their own probation and parole supervision. And in 49 states, there's a fee for the electronic bracelet that monitors people when they're out of jail. I got that information from NPR.org, and you know they have a couple of incredible podcasts that's worth listening to. Yeah, you're going to pay. So, you know, the United States is made up of 50 states, and you see that over 40-something of the states are already saying, look, you're going to have to pay. If you get in trouble, you're going to pay for room and board. You're going to pay for any sort of probation, supervision. You're going to pay if we have to put that bracelet on you. So you're not really going to get out of paying that debt. You're not going to get out of paying that fee. And, you know, the reality is we know that lots of people struggle to pay the fees. I mean, you've already violated the law, been in jail, and at the end of the day, you've made it difficult to even get a job, but it doesn't matter. There is something called debtors prison. You know, you can't go to jail for this, and I don't think we really have a good sense of the reality of that. So as much as I do my podcast to say, hey, you know, these are my thoughts about a particular topic, or to sort of rant about a issue that, you know, irks me or upsets me or makes me sad, or to share some sort of civil rights or social issue, you know, I also just like a good old-fashioned FYI. This is just for your information. You need to know that the courts has an expectation that when they call you before the court that you show up. You need to know that if you don't have the money, then you need to go before the court and explain your hardship. And because the reality is, it's always difficult to determine whether people can pay their fines and fees. It's always difficult to determine whether or not people actually have money, or whether they're just sort of playing with the courts. I mean, it doesn't help you when you show up in court with expensive clothes and jewelry, when you you know, when you go and look as if you are living a larger life than maybe you are. But what you don't want to get caught up in is the courts determining that you're willfully not paying. That you know you have the capacity to pay, but you're willfully not paying. And look, there are judges who have literally told debtors, sell your car, borrow from your mama, get rid of those expensive clothes, get rid of your smoking habit. Like, they want the money. They want you to pay your fees and fines. And here's the other piece to it. The law argues it's not wrong to have criminals, or, you know, have to pay a debt. But it does say it's wrong to put them in jail if they can't pay. So if you can't pay, you need to go before the courts and say, I cannot afford to pay my fines and fees, and to really ask the courts to work with you. You know, there will be judges that tell you to turn off your cell phone, quit smoking, and they want you to use that money instead to begin to pay your court fees. They even have some judges who tell people to use the money from the Social Security disability, from their veterans benefits, from their welfare checks to pay their court fees, or they're going to face jail time. That's how real it is. So if you don't really have the funds, you need to give the courts a full picture of the type of financial hardship you're in, why you're in, and allow them to work with you. Recently, I encouraged a close relative of mine to do just that. And what the probation officer did was put him on $10 a month. Every time he has to go before the probation officer, he has to bring $10 a month. And he, you know, at some point he made some wisecrack, like, if I come up on a little money, I'm not going to tell him about it, I'm not going to pay. I said, well, first of all, you are going to pay. Okay, because should you not pay, you're going to pay with your tail in jail. Okay, if this man was decent enough to break this down to $10 a month, you should be, if you get 15, give him 15. Get rid of the debt. This is not debt that you want to carry over, because not only can it lean against your credit, but what we're learning is you can go to jail. Again, this is just a simple FYI for your information. You should find this information very empowering, and it should also be a part of what you put in your archives and pull out in order to discipline yourself to pay your debt. Again, you've been listening to Beyond the Surface Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Wanda J. Evans-Brewer, and until we chat again, be safe in God's grace.